Support comes from Gemma, architects, planners, and designers seeking to bring joy to their clients and communities. Details at gemastl.com.
From St. Louis Public Radio. This is the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air. I'm Jason Rosenbaum. Sunday will mark 6 months since a tornado devastated portions of St. Louis and St. Louis County. The storm decimated a large portion of North St. Louis, a part of the city that had already been struggling for decades with disinvestment and crime. Since some officials estimate that the storm inflicted nearly $2 billion worth of damage, nobody expects the rebuilding process to be quick or easy. But elected officials and social service agencies are gravely concerned about where storm victims will go as winter approaches. Earlier this week, I spoke with St. Louis Mayor Cara Spencer at City Hall about where St. Louis stands in its long road to recovery. We also discussed difficulties in getting funds to affected residents and whether regional cooperation could help strengthen emergency preparedness in the future. I started off by asking Mayor Spencer what she's heard from storm victims recently and whether they think the governmental response has been adequate.
Boy, it really runs the gamut, Jason. We were on Tuesday giving out food at a food, for veterans. And so many folks came through the line that identified themselves as folks who had been, their homes had been destroyed by the tornado. And the responses varied. People expressed a heartbreaking sense of devastation, personal devastation. But there was also so much gratitude for what the city has been able to do. There was a recognition that there's still so much left to be done. There was disappointment, there's fear, there's heartbreak. The span of emotions that people express is just, it's indescribable. There's every emotion under the sun. And I think, as to be expected, we had such an unexpected, massive sense of devastation hit our city. And we are still processing it as a community, as are the individuals who have been impacted by it most.
St. Louis Public Radio reporters recently spoke with a number of tornado victims, and I think that the common thing they want to know is what is slowing down the distribution of tornado-related funds. I understand it takes time for money to go from government to individuals, but I think that these people want specific reasons why the money flow has not been quicker.
Yeah, that has been a really, really big challenge on our end. Right off the bat, I think one of our key focus areas was partnering and getting FEMA support, recognizing just that's the large sense of money that we needed to come into our community. And there has been, first I'll say, there is a huge gap in what residents need and what we've been able to provide. That is unequivocal, just a gulf of need that we have been unable to meet at this time. But at the same time, there have been quite a few things that we have been able to do. The city has already spent over $30 million in just direct services. We have secured individual assistance from FEMA of over $50 million that have gone directly to residents, not nearly enough to make their lives whole, their homes whole, and that is certainly true.
Because you said the damage could be as much as $2 billion.
Absolutely. And that is just an estimate. That is just what we're estimating the damage to be done. That has been done. And that, to get the debris and demolition work completed, the estimates on just that work product alone have spanned $200 million to upwards of $750 million. And so we're still trying to wrap our heads and our figures around what the damage actually costs. Part of the issue has been, the city's emergency response command unit was 5 employees deep when the tornado struck. And so we have been building out the apparatus within city government to actually run the response as we are responding. And that has been an enormous challenge. We are using taxpayer dollars in large part to fund the effort that the city is able to come to the table with. And there are processes, and there's a clear sense that there's a responsibility to do that in legal terms, legal ways, and ways that unfortunately take time to get out the door.
For example, I could imagine verifying that they actually are entitled to certain money takes time. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say. But some of the other big projects, debris removal, for example, we had contracts in place with Spiritus, for example, to remove large amounts of debris, and those didn't work out the way we had originally intended them to.
Why not?
There was a scope change, a failure to really understand the full scope, I think, on the part of the contractor. I think there was an earnestness on their part to want to fulfill the needs, and there was a disconnect there. And so, there's also, just the contracting piece is so arduous. We have, in order to spend dollars, have to go through the Board of Aldermen, the Board of V&A, have to go through procurement. We have emergency orders in place that have allowed us to fast track a lot of this. But, we've also got to make sure that, for example, we have programs to repair people's homes. And when we have contractors going out there to either remove debris or do work to stabilize homes, we want to make sure that those contractors are qualified and can do the work. There's a whole host of things that go into building up these programs that unfortunately have taken quite a bit of time to get going.
I've watched a couple of meetings about the future of the tornado recovery, and there are some residents that just want the entirety of the RAMS money to go towards rebuilding North St. Louis and strengthening North St. Louis. Now, it's easy to memory hole that 9-10 months ago, that was not really what anybody in that discussion wanted. They wanted a lot to go to North St. Louis, but also a lot of money to go downtown and even into things like childcare. And I'm sure that other people that want that money probably don't want it spent in one place. But what do you say to the people of North City who see that tranche of money and say, we've been neglected, disrespected, and sometimes purposely disinvested for the last 50 years?
50 years or more.
50 years or more, and that's where the money should go.
First, to acknowledge that perspective is rooted in truth and reality, and the lived experience and the real experience of St. Louis, of our city. So, and I will also say that that perspective is rooted in a fair desire to rebuild the area that impacted by the tornado that, as you pointed out, has been disinvested of. So there's a true need there that far exceeds even what the RAMS settlement funds could provide. That being said, and before the tornado, I was pretty clear in my intentions of having those funds be distributed in a way that can reinvest in North St. Louis. And I still stand behind that. I think it's important that as we move through reinvesting in the area impacted by the tornado, that plan is driven by those impacted. And so, our plan, my hope for the RAMS settlement funds is that we shift more funds into investing in North St. Louis while being mindful of the broader city's needs, the infrastructure, the water, the streets, and other things that we have to invest in citywide, and recognizing that the future of our city does depend on having a robust downtown that can be the economic driver that really subsidizes the rest of the city, and that is in bad need of investment as well. So I think taking a balanced approach here is the key that that's going to provide the brightest future for the city as a whole.
I want to shift to the winter because I think Obviously, if your home was destroyed or heavily damaged by the tornado, how you've reacted since then is probably dependent on your individual situation. So for instance, if your house was damaged but is repairable, you may still be in it. If your house was damaged and unlivable, you might have moved somewhere else. But there are a lot of people who have been sleeping in tents or been sleeping in damaged property that they own. What is the city going to do to accommodate people so that they have a safe place to live as the temperature gets colder?
To be clear, my top priority right now is winter planning. That is my top priority and the top priority of everybody in the mayor's office right now. And we recognize, as you pointed out, that there are folks that are not homeless, that for all intents and purpose, when temperatures get below freezing, are going to be in exceptionally vulnerable situation and dangerous. So we are focused on providing shelter for everybody who needs it this winter. And I'm enormously grateful to the work that we stood up a winter planning task force that is being led by myself, Julian Nix, and several members of the provider community and advocacy community outside of city government. We've been meeting for several weeks now, and we unfortunately or fortunately had a dry run just earlier this week when temperatures got below 30, both Sunday and Monday night. So I'll say what we're doing is twofold, really making sure that we have enough shelter space for the traditionally unhoused population, which we're estimating right now to be around 600 folks. And we are expanding the beds available to include folks that have been impacted by the tornado. We're also simultaneously working to ensure that we have a rental assistance program that can put families and vulnerable folks that were impacted by the tornado in apartments when possible to get through the winter, to make sure that when possible, we're avoiding putting families in congregate shelter if we can.
I think there might be people listening who may be like, why are people staying in damaged homes, or why are they in their tents? And I'm gonna put myself in their shoes for a minute. That's their property. Just because it was damaged by the tornado does not mean they gave up their home or their property. And I think that there could be, in some situations, real concerns if they leave that property. Things are going to get stolen in terms of possessions. Our building material is going to get stolen. And that may make them, even when it gets cold, really hesitant to leave. So with the caveat, you no longer directly control the St. Louis Police Department, but you are on the board of the new police board. What is the city going to do to make sure that that property that those people owned is going to be protected if they go into shelter or temporary apartments?
Well, you're right. I mean, I think, if my home were badly damaged, I would absolutely stay in my home. It's my home. And for many folks, like myself, your home is our biggest asset. And so I think it's absolutely reasonable, expected that folks would stay in their homes. And frankly, if you are missing a roof or having missing windows still, as many people still are, this is albeit uncomfortable, but a livable situation even in St. Louis summers. Certainly this fall has been pretty nice weather. But this becomes, as you pointed out, extremely dangerous when temperatures get very low. So we do expect that many folks that have been sheltering, living in their own homes will be unable to do so when temperatures get very low. So your question, though, when folks are forced out of their buildings, what is the city, the police department going to do to make sure that the community is safe? Immediately following the tornado, our police department did a truly phenomenal job of ensuring that the community was safe of looting. We did have some limited reports of looting, but by and large, the St. Louis Police Department did an absolutely phenomenal job of doing that. And we're going to lean into our partnership there to ensure that we're addressing concerns this winter as well.
I want to move on to FEMA, because I think both of us recognized, or not just both of us, every policymaker from federal on down to local recognized FEMA's assistance was critical for the recovery. But I've talked with pretty much everybody across the spectrum, from like the farthest left to the farthest right, and nobody is really satisfied with how FEMA has responded to this tornado. I'm wondering if you're in that category of people who have not particularly been happy with the federal response.
Well, in the hours following the tornado, we fully expected that FEMA would show up and run the response, much like they did in Joplin or following other major disasters across the United States. That did not happen here. And so it took several weeks to get FEMA engaged, to get the declaration. And that was the direct result of a partnership with our governor and our federal delegation. But I have to say, it's both and at the same time, because I have been frustrated. We have all been frustrated and disappointed with FEMA's failure to drive the response, providing housing, providing food, the logistical nightmare that was immediately apparent in the hours, certainly days and weeks following the tornado, that we were building as we went. That being said, the folks on the ground, when FEMA did show up, I'm thinking of Willie Nunn and his team, were absolutely phenomenal. Hands-on, truly cared, and were partners with us. So what limited resources FEMA was able to provide us, they were truly phenomenal. That being said, I think the key here for our country is we need to be really seriously thinking and asking ourselves, what do we want from our federal government, and what do we want to expect from our local jurisdictions? Do we want a nation where every city is prepared and has the tools and the readiness to respond to a tornado, an earthquake, or other massive disaster that may or may not strike? Or do we want to centralize that response unit in a federally funded and functioning and responsive FEMA? My argument would be that as a nation, we would be better off, more efficient, and certainly more effective if we centralize and share the resources and expertise across the nation for very unusual events, rather than saddling every single municipal government to being able to respond to what may or may not happen in the lifetime of each of those cities.
When I read and heard about all the problems with the sirens, my first thought was, why doesn't St. Louis County, and frankly Jefferson and St. Charles County, have one emergency response center? And I know the details of that are really hard. Like, St. Louis City has one police department and they have one fire department, and all those other jurisdictions have a lot more. What do you think regional leaders should do to make sure the emergency response is more integrated, so we don't have an emergency response that was frankly lacking in the city of St. Louis?
Yeah, I think you're spot on that mass disasters know no political boundaries, and we absolutely need to be thinking about a regional response. And there is some level of that through STARS, and East-West Gateway does have some component of it. But it was clear to us that the city of St. Louis did not have as robust an integrated response component as was ideal for us to be able to respond. Having those mutual aid agreements, not just across fire and police, which we did have in place and were very, very helpful in the hours, days following the tornado, but with forestry departments, with streets departments, with other departments that could have been more helpful in lending their staff, expertise, and equipment to debris removal and other things that we needed to conduct right away. So it's clear to us that establishing a better regional protocol, response, and integrated collaborative response would have been better for all. And we are committed to building that in the future. We're going to be announcing a new SEMA director here in the coming days, and I'm excited to bring that person's perspective to the table, which I know to be rooted in a regional apparatus for responding to disasters.
That was St. Louis Mayor Cara Spencer, who spoke with me from her office in City Hall earlier this week. You can listen to an extended version of this interview by going to stlpr.org.
This episode was produced and recorded by Jason Rosenbaum.
Podcast design by Aaron Dorr.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations. And leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thanks.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.